Well, welcome. We are thrilled to have you here for another information session on crafting your next chapter. My name is Seth Green, and on a morning like this one, I'm especially grateful to say I'm the Dean of the Graham School here at the University of Chicago, and I want to virtually welcome you to our gorgeous campus in all of its splendor. And we share this because this is the place where the big ideas are born that really infuse the practices and the education of our school. And we are so grateful to welcome you, even virtually, to our very special campus. What we're hoping to do over the next hour is talk a little bit about UChicago Graham, who is the host of this program, why we started Crafting Your Next Chapter, as this is the inaugural cohort coming up this autumn. And then I'm going to turn it over to Russ and Stephanie Eisenstadt, our partners and the visionaries behind this program, to offer you the most important piece of this information session, which is a snapshot of the program itself. And then we'll be turning it over to my colleague, Michelle Libby, who can talk you through the application process. And finally, we'll come to questions, which we anticipate will be about 15 to 20 minutes and should suffice for anything that you're wondering at the end of this presentation. So let me start with a warm welcome to the University of Chicago and the Graham School. We are very proud to be the destination for lifelong learners who are seeking to better understand the world and to live examined lives of purpose. And we have been in this mission for 132 years. We are proud to be one of the 3 founding divisions of the university, because when the university was being established by William Rainey Harper and John D. Rockefeller, there was a question about how do we bring the ideas of this university to people across all ages and stages of life. And that has been our mission from the beginning. We're the first extension, as they're often called in higher education, in the United States. And we continue to this day to constantly be asking that question of how do we bring the practices, rigor, and distinctiveness of our education to people across stages of life that go well beyond their career and where people don't often think of university partners. We want to be there. We want to help people on their learning and wellness journeys. We have 4 main programmatic areas as a school. We have a Master of Liberal Arts that is among the most respected and rigorous in the world. We have a basic program where you go across great books in a 4-year curricular journey. We have an open and kind of very diverse set of enrollment courses. And then the place where this particular program fits is in what we call lifelong leadership, where we're really helping people across ages and stages to develop the knowledge, skills, and networks to lead effectively across all chapters of life. So I want to talk a little bit about why we are starting Crafting Your Next Chapter. And we're very excited, and we'll talk about this toward the end, to already be in a place where we have 19 members of this inaugural cohort, and we see this upcoming moment of deadline being an opportunity to find the remaining 5 cohort members who will be part of this 24-person cohort that are really looking at discerning their next chapter. So the origin of this program is an obvious one, especially if you're here, you're likely part of this trend. People are living longer. And not only are they living longer, but they're having wellness longer. And something that I actually learned from Russ, and it's a great quote he'll use later, is that this doesn't just extend old age. This is opening up a whole new chapter of life. And so we at the Graham School began asking questions about what does it mean that as people now hit 60 or 65 and have certain indicators and can reliably look out to age 90 or even 100, what does it mean for the way that people learn and the way that they navigate these different chapters of life? And so in October of last year, we brought together 250 eminent scholars, distinguished practitioners, and accomplished executives to collectively explore the value and possibility of what we call life transition programs, programs that would leverage the assets of the university from a learning agenda to really help people navigate this new opportunity set presented by longevity. And we brought together people that you see here as examples, and we began asking these questions about what would it look like to support people in this chapter. And what we developed initially is something called the Leadership and Society Initiative. And that was aimed at supporting distinguished leaders in designing meaningful next chapters. But that program was for people that had already made that decision to leave their careers and to begin a gap year where they would be full-time in residence with us at the university in really discerning and then activating that encore chapter. And as we began rolling out the Leadership and Society Initiative, and we're thrilled we'll be welcoming an incredible cohort of individuals to the university next month as fellows of that initiative, we got a lot of questions. And what we heard was people want to start discerning their next chapter before the current chapter ends. And so what would it look like to have people be able, in a less deep way, but still a very meaningful way, to begin in their mid to late career to explore these questions of what do I want in that next chapter? And how can I, while I'm still in my current chapter, begin planning toward and actually gaining some of the skills and networks to move into that next chapter successfully. And so it was at that time that Russ and I have had a long-standing relationship, and I've respected his work for decades and knew about his work with Stephanie at Mass General, where they had been running this really impactful program for people who in that case were senior physicians who were thinking about their next chapters, that we had a conversation about, is this a program that we could work together and develop for this audience that we see of people that are in mid to late career and want to begin now crafting their next chapter, so that by the time they finish their current chapter, they already have a sense and direction and a compass for what's next. And that was the origin of Crafting Your Next Chapter. And we are thrilled to be in a place where we have such outstanding faculty and such an incredible group already confirmed to be part of it. And with that, I will enthusiastically turn it over to Russ and Stephanie. Russ is a longstanding scholar and educator. He's led extraordinary institutions like the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership. Stephanie is a doctor who is both someone who has been a physician and a physician educator, as well as a coach now. And as I mentioned, they have been running this program in a different format for some time and really been able to see extraordinary impacts. And so we're thrilled to partner with them in this new setting. And Russ and Stephanie, let me turn it over to you with great gratitude.
Thank you, Seth. It's terrific to be here again virtually and to see all of you as well. And now the major challenge, which is figuring out if I can make the share screen work. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Everybody see my screen? Yes.
We do.
Pass the test. So what Stephanie and I would like to do for the next few minutes is, as Seth highlighted, kind of give you a little bit of a background and a snapshot of the program and cover two things. First, take some time to really go deeper on some of the things that Seth touched on around hopefully helping you to kind of reframe a bit how you think about the second half of your life. This is certainly part of what's been happening for Stephanie and I over the last year, and it's a process that we see not just in the people taking the class, but also in a lot of our friends and so on who are at this stage as well. And then really dive in a bit deeper into the actual course, the curriculum, and give you a little bit of a kind of a preview of some of the key territory we'd be covering and some of the key questions that we'll be exploring. So, in a lot of ways, this course is, I think, very personal for Stephanie and I. I think, there's a power, I think, in teaching something that you yourself are experiencing. One of the things that's exciting for me about teaching, I've done a lot of teaching over the years, but it's something special to feel like you really are on a learning journey with the people in the program itself. And I think that's part of what we'll talk about a lot in the program is how do we create a community where people can be learning and sharing their experience. And so I want to start a bit with my own experience. As Seth talked about when Seth and I met, I was the executive director of a nonprofit organization that I created, the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership. I was one of the co-founders. We had written a book called Higher Ambition about what great leaders do to create economic and social value. We created this consortium of CEOs and companies that were all purpose and values driven. And it was a very exciting, I think, 10 years of my life. But then I hit 65 and I felt like, you know, this was a wonderful chapter. I felt really good about it. But I also felt like it was time to pass the baton on to someone else and really explore different territory. And at about that time, I started getting some interesting kind of questions from friends and colleagues. So you know, people started saying at 65, you know, how does it feel to be approaching the Social Security years? How's your health holding out? What are you doing with all that room now that the kids are out of the house? Are you guys moving to Florida? Are you moving south someplace? It must be cold up in Boston. Have you taken up golf yet? And then finally, you know, when are you planning on retiring? And, you know, I have to say that those were not questions that I could really relate to. I understood where they were coming from, but they really weren't the questions that Stephanie and I were asking, or frankly, that an awful lot of people in my life were asking as well. The questions we were asking are very much the same questions that we want to be exploring in this program with you, which is, you know, can you aspire to something other than just getting older? You know, at this stage of the game, when you think about being in the second half of your career, how do you fully leverage your capabilities and talents? Are there ways to do that that may be different than you've done that in the past? And how do you find meaning and purpose in this next chapter in your work and life? And do that in a way that may build on what you've done before, but also may open up new kinds of horizons for you as well. And those felt like a very different kinds of set of questions, and really quite different than what we had been hearing from other folks. And in some ways, challenging questions to be answering. And part of, I think, what Steph and I realized is that there was really no roadmap. You know, when I thought about my own life and the kind of models I had for what that period looked like, you know, like all of us, we think about our parents and we think about our grandparents. And for me, you know, this is a picture of my grandfather, Sam Levine. He and his wife Bessie, after they retired in the Catskills outside of New York, were more affectionately known as the Borscht Belt. And you know, when they hit 65, they really were ready to retire. You know, and in the classic sense. I mean, there was nothing more wonderful for them, having worked incredibly intensely from a very early age in physically demanding work, to be able to truly just relax, you know, sit in a rocking chair, talk to other people, you know, play bridge, worry about what you're going to eat for lunch and for dinner. And that was terrific for them. You know, my folks retired to Florida. And so I had a very traditional view of what retirement was about. And while I realized that that may be okay for some people, and it certainly was okay for where I'd come from, it wasn't a model that worked for me. Interestingly, Stephanie had a very different experience. And Steph, do you want to share a little bit?
Sure, of course. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. So Nancy, my grandmother, who was an artist, chose a very different life path. Her husband died when she was age 60, and she had to really rethink her life. And she found she could connect her art with travel. And here she is on an archaeological dig in Tanzania, Africa, and she decided to live with the Maasai tribe for 3 months following this. She used the experience to create serigraphs and then continued to travel and have living experiences around the world well into her 80s. My father, Philip, on the other hand, had a more traditional road to retirement. And as an organic chemist, he worked in R&D for a large corporation, and they had mandatory retirement at age 65. So whether you were ready or not, he had no choice and was retired. And he did struggle with this. So, these days, some of us have choices, others do not. Given the current economy and financial constraints, some of us just need to keep working and don't have choice to leave the workforce. But that doesn't mean that one can't reinvent, redefine, or think about how to repurpose one's work. We have gathered a much better understanding about what I call the peri-retirement journey for people from various research studies on mid to late career transition and well-being. And mid to late career is defined age 50 and above. The health and retirement study conducted through the Institute of Social Research at the University of Michigan is one of a large demographic study. And the average age of retirement in the US for all workers has been rising from age 57 to age 62 now. From other studies on physicians, they have traditionally retired later on average, closer to age 68. And now post-COVID, many, not just physicians, but many are reassessing their options. However, given the changing healthcare landscape, the average age of retirement for physicians is actually now dropping to age 65 with a downward trend. And with a third of physicians in the US now over the age of 60, a trend that's resulting in a physician shortage. So we need to ask, can we be more creative and inventive about this time of mid to late career? Start to reconceptualize, especially for those who want to continue to contribute and use their skills in a more meaningful and effective way for impact. Move to a conversation that includes words like repurposing, rewiring, and away from just leaving and checking out. Russ?
That's great. Thank you, Stephanie. So, I think the perceptions that we have then and the mindsets that we bring to this are really important. And I love this this picture, which is a Gestalt picture. And the question is, what do you see? Is this a young woman or is this an old woman? Well, the answer is actually both, depending on how you look at it. And depending on what the Gestalt is that you see, perception becomes reality. And so our mindset really shapes how we see and react to the world. And so the question is, maybe to take a minute and reflect for yourself how you imagine your own future years unfolding. Do you, and think particularly around the kinds of models that you've grown up with. What is it that, as you imagine what this would look like? Is it about a slow and steady decline, or is it an opportunity for renewal and reinvention? And as I suggested, you may want to think about, again, those role models. Think about your parents, think about grandparents, think about older friends who may be a bit further along than you are. Which of those do you most resonate with, as models of what you would hope to be doing? And which of those really feel like, they may be great for other people, but really not right for yourself? And so that, I think it's a particularly kind of powerful exercise. Certainly we found it so. And so, this question, again, but also understanding, as we've said, that we all have really grown up with a pretty traditional model that's almost hardwired into us. And it's what I call kind of this three-stage life, right? Where there's this rapid growth and development in child and adolescence. And, it's interesting, Seth's comment about lifelong learning. The notion that actually learning continues after you get your college degree, is an important notion. But traditionally, I think people think, well, okay, there's this long plateau. You have your career, you get, and maybe you get married and have kids or not. And then you hit 65, you get the retirement notice for Social Security, and then it's this rapid decline. And this, by the way, this whole three-stage life is not a new thing. You know, even in fact, if you go back to antiquity, there's a wonderful riddle from the story of Oedipus on the road to Thebes. And it's about Oedipus and the Sphinx. And Oedipus is walking down the road trying to get into Thebes, and he sees this Sphinx, which is half woman and half lion with wings, as you can see in the picture, and lots of bones around. And the Sphinx says, "I'm going to tell you a riddle, and if you get the riddle right, you can pass and go into the city. But if you get it wrong, I'm going to eat you, and you're going to join the bones around you." So the stakes are high. We're pretty high. And the riddle was, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? So did anybody know the answer? Maybe somebody put the answer in chat if anybody has heard this one. I can't look at the chat. So is anybody and any ideas coming up?
You've got humans from Judith.
Got humans.
Exactly. So we have a classical scholar here. And so again, walks on 4 legs in the morning. You think about a baby crawling, 2 legs at noon, again, us as adults, and 3 legs in the evening, someone walking with a cane. So this is a pretty, this is over 2,500 years ago. So it's a pretty deep-seated pattern, and shifting that frame is really an important topic. And as Seth said, while it made a lot of sense in the past when people, life expectancy was, Social Security age really defined a point where people were starting to decline, it makes less and less sense given where we all are in our lives. And so, there's a wonderful book by Mary Catherine Bateson called Composing a Further Life, really filled with wisdom. And she has this wonderful quote, which I love. She said, "Look, we have not added decades to life expectancy by simply extending old age. Instead, we have opened up a new space partway through the life course, a second and different kind of adulthood that precedes old age. And as a result, every stage of life is undergoing change. That this isn't just about more, but it's about fundamentally, qualitatively different in terms of how you think about what your life is about." And so, a lot of researchers in this area kind of are converging, if you will, around this shift from thinking about the 3-stage life, again, about childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age, to 2 additional stages. One, interestingly enough, is a period opening up in the 20s, post-college and into the early 30s, which we think about as setting the course, establishing core commitments as an independent adult and work and relations, and really, a period of extended exploration. As our youngest child put it, "Dad, I'm on a voyage of discovery." And there are a lot of kids on a voyage of discovery, getting married later, settling into their careers at a later point. They have children. Again, the average age for having children is increasing. And then mid-career, which is that period 30 to 50 plus, and then the stage that we're really focusing on in this program, which is late career rewirement, which is this opportunity to rebalance, revitalize, and reimagine work and life, and an extraordinary opportunity to explore paths not taken, and also to think about one's legacy and how to pass the baton. And that rewirement stage, if you will, rather than retirement, again, is the opportunity that's really the focus for this program. And it's a period not just of opportunity, but also of challenges. And I want to just talk some about those, some of the themes that have come up over the course, over the years that Stephanie and I have taught it, and just in conversations with people going through this period as well as in the literature. The first point, I think in some ways quite fundamentally is that, part of the opportunity is around increased freedom, right? That says, look, we don't necessarily need to be working in the same role or in the same job or at the same pace that we've always worked up to now. But with that freedom comes uncertainty as well, which is the flip side. And then the other piece that we hear from people is, and I certainly can relate to, is an increased awareness of mortality, that time is not endless. It's, as we think about our parents and their mortality and dealing with aged parents, as we start to enter this period, as we see we ourselves are not maybe dealing with physical issues, and we see that in people around us, you start to say, okay, I have so much time. Time is not infinite. How am I going to make the time that I have really count? And then there are a set of other sort of broader challenges that we hear from people, really around thinking about people's place in society and at work. Thinking about, as you see a next generation coming along, am I still relevant? Do I still have a contribution to make? Gosh, I've been doing, what I've been doing for 30 plus years. How do I keep that fresh? How do I think about renewing myself? The classic 50, think about that as sort of a classic midlife crisis. Often people talk about at that stage and that opportunity for renewal. Sometimes we hear people saying, look, it feels like all the energy is going to that next generation and the high potentials. I almost feel invisible sometimes, at work in terms of where I am and what that's about and the contribution that I have to make. And then, there are another set of challenges that we find emerging for people who actually have left full-time employment, whether that's at 65 or earlier or later. One of those people talk about is around identity. So much of our identity is built around our roles in organization. The card we carry, what am I if I don't have that title after my name? If I go to a party and people ask me, what am I doing? What do I say, right? Because so much of our identity is built around our work. What's my purpose? What value am I adding in the world? Because so much, again, of that has been built into the work that we might have been doing. How do I find that differently? And then community. We build networks of relationships at work. We spend some intense time with a set of people. How do we recreate that in meaningful ways? So there really are both, in addition to opportunity, real challenge. And yet the other piece of this is an understanding that we bring to this extraordinary strengths. And, it's interesting that I realize that I can't run a mile as quickly as I once did, or play basketball nearly as well as my kids at this point. But one of the things that heartens me as I think about the research around what happens with people over the years and capabilities is that, in fact, what many researchers has found is that our emotional intelligence, our awareness about other human beings, and our ability to be able to connect to them significantly increases over time. Our ability to spot patterns, to see things that we've seen, understand how to address issues. And so that's part of what we want to be unlocking in the program, is again bringing that wisdom to bear. And by the way, this opportunity to rewire is not just an opportunity for us individually. It's also an opportunity for those who are working for our organizations to retain those capabilities, to avoid people simply retiring in place, and to make sure that transition happens when it does in a way that's thoughtful and intentional. And sadly, in a lot of organizations, and part of what we hear, people are almost nervous about raising the issue about how do I think about a different role, because somehow it creates this feeling that they may be less relevant or not be taken as seriously. So we see that as really an opportunity as well. And so, the point here in the promise is really to understand, again, another body of research that shows that, I call this a smile chart, because it really both makes me happy, and also because of the line itself, which really highlights that after age 50, the best is truly yet to come. That in fact, if people are thoughtful and intentional, life satisfaction can continue to increase all the way through the rest of the lifespan. And so the invitation, and for those in this period, and really, that really is the question to ask for yourself in terms of whether this is a program that's interesting potentially for you, is when you reflect, how do you know that you're ready for this kind of rewirement? When you reflect that you've done much of what you would hope to do in life, but it's not too late to do something more and different. And that's the opportunity of what happened, we're talking about in this course. And Steph, do you want to share? I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie to talk more about the program itself and the specifics.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Russ. So I love that quote so much. So the program was initially developed and refined at Massachusetts General Hospital, which is an academic medical center in Boston affiliated with Harvard Medical School. And the course was designed for mid to late physician clinicians and educators and MD and PhD researchers. The class was quite diverse, some taking on new work and academic roles mid to late career. Others wanted to sort of redesign their current situation post-COVID. Some wanted to achieve a better work-life balance, some downsizing, others finding themselves at a transition point, having to pass their leadership roles on to others. And then there were those who were considering full retirement, that some didn't anticipate, and others just wanted to explore the world beyond MGH. So the feedback that we got, 100% of the participants actually would recommend the course to others, and the overall course rating was a 4.74 out of 5. And we found that there was a much broader appeal to the course. So here we are working with Seth and the University of Chicago. And so the course that we're offering here at the University of Chicago Graham School will be an 8 virtual session course, 120 minutes or 2 hours every other week, except for the 1 week between the last 2 sessions so that we can be done by Christmas break. And the course is a guided journey grounded in a long history of research in the fields of lifespan development and positive psychology. And it includes a variety of things: self-reflective exercises, some provocative readings, large and small group discussion, peer-to-peer support, individual coaching. And then we also have set a limited enrollment for this course to sort of enhance group cohesion and the experience. Russ, the next slide. So nothing tells you more about a course than participant feedback. So first and foremost, our MGH participants reported that they felt the course created a safe and trusted environment for learning, a safe place to share vulnerabilities, challenges, and successes around transition. And one participant noted the breadth and depth of the group that we put together, with participants kind of at all points of their journey. And I quote, "Some of us are just starting, others are near an abyss, with others have fallen in and trying to crawl their way out, some standing on the other side, with others who are already walking towards the light." It helped many to be able to focus on their current needs, their aspirations, their next steps, and most reported feeling more confident as they considered their choices, identifying where to actually let go of areas and things, and where there were areas that were for further attention and growth. And I quote, "All of us have benefited from this kind of learning experience, the diversity of perspectives and community." Next slide, Russ. So we've organized the course into 3 sections: reframe, revitalize, and then reinvent. And we start with the reframing process. This is testing your assumptions about your future. Could it be different than what we're currently imagining? What and where is the opportunity? And how do we embrace a growth mindset in real time and learn from exploration and experimentation? Next is thinking more about how to revitalize and refuel. How do we harness our energy and re-energize our current work in life? And how do we take care of ourselves? It's important to have some structured, reflective time to take stock where you are now, learn from your history, understand what it takes to be in a growth mindset and experiment, and then to clear out that underbrush of less meaningful and de-energizing activities, perhaps negotiating new roles and commitments and building new paths and habits and mindsets. And finally, we then get to the position of being able to reinvent. We'll brainstorm and design together a future life and what that might look like, setting a vision, drafting a plan, making choices about work and life, about the work-life balance, and developing strategies around centering, renewal, and staying the course and sustaining the progress. And as you progress, you might find that the level of effort and risk and commitment evolves too, which is why we feel this peer-to-peer community and integrating a coaching approach to our lives is really important. Next slide, Russ. So we find throughout the journey an openness to a progressive resetting of these assumptions happens. We learn how to understand what our brain is really telling us. Now, we know from neuropsychology that our thoughts are many, they're often confusing, forever evolving and changing. So we evolve from this sort of all and none thinking to learning specifically where we can dial up and dial down. We go from thinking about making the big changes and decisions, getting overwhelmed by that, to starting with small steps and small changes, experimenting, learning as you go from those experiments, and revitalizing and refueling ourselves before the reinvention. And then our next reaction may be that we need to figure this out on our own. You know, we'll be in a class, we'll just go home and do the reading, be by ourselves. But through this course is different. We begin to recognize the power of group and the power of a safe and trusted community for this kind of work. And we often start in our thinking with what's not working. But in this course, we think about what's working and how we can build on that and capitalize on that. How can we savor those highs and learn from the lows and then build and capitalize on our inherent strengths? And finally, we don't need to be paralyzed by the thought that we're just facing inevitable decline, no matter what our challenges are. We can learn about opportunity and what's possible and what lifelong learning really can look like. Now, you know, all of this sounds pretty straightforward, but in practice, we all know it's really easier said than done. Russ?
So what I'd like to do is pick up where Stephanie left off, and again, give a preview of some of the other key ideas in the program. We talk about revitalization. One of the core frameworks in the program is this, what we call the inner compass. And this really comes out of 50 years of research in lifespan development and positive psychology around the kind of the fundamental factors that make a difference in terms of people thriving throughout their lives, life satisfaction, even longevity, long-term longevity. And at the top of the chart is meaning and purpose, really believing that your life is meaningful, that it's making a contribution beyond just yourself as an individual. And at the west part of the quadrant, relationships, the quality of your relationships, both with your family, with friends, with community. In fact, there's recent research by Robert Waldinger that suggests that, in fact, if you look at predictors of long-term longevity, if you look at the quality of people's relationships in their 60s, it's actually as great a predictor of long-term longevity as cardiovascular fitness and other physical things. And then health, both physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. And then finally, just joy, having fun in life. And what we find we found in the program is that for a lot of us, our work has been that source of meaning and purpose and focus, and thinking in the round about all of these dimensions, thinking about the life that you currently have and the life you want to leave is really powerful. And so, one thing that you may want to do, just even for yourself, is just to think about red, yellow, green, where you are on on each of those quadrants. And it's something that I do, on a regular basis, in terms of getting to a point of balance. And that then leads in the program to saying, okay, what actions can I take in the here and now to enhance my life right now and to explore the possibilities for an even better next chapter? As Stephanie said, one of the key themes in the course is really around experimentation and looking at the things that you can do now that you might explore in those quadrants that really set up what your future might look like. And this is a more detailed view of those, and one of the templates that we use in the program to really think about the pluses and minuses in each areas, and then to think about where one might go. Another exercise that we have people do in the program, which Stephanie touched on before, is what we call clearing out the underbrush, because we find for all of us, there's all this stuff that takes up our days, commitments that we've made, just clutter, and they're not bad things to be doing, but they're not the things that are most fundamental and meaningful. And so we find this simple exercise of having people literally list all the things and the commitments that you've made, thinking about for each of them, how energizing are they, how meaningful are they, and what does that say relative to what you want to do more of or less of, or approach differently. And we found for the people in the program, this was one of the more powerful things to be doing in the present, in a way that then opens up the space for people to actually be crafting that next chapter. Because often the reaction is, geez, I'm just so overwhelmed getting through the day. How can I even think about what my future would look like? And then finally, as we help people to think about their future, we find that there's a set of fundamental questions that we really explore throughout the course that increasingly crystallize for people. Questions like, what do you want to preserve and build on in this next stage? That as we think about the next chapter, this is about not just about change, but about continuity. What are the golden threads in your life that you really care about? What would you hope to be different? Are there paths not taken in your life that you want to more fully explore? This is an opportunity to say, what are the things that I didn't do that I might really feel like I want to do? What are the non-negotiables? Fundamentally, when I boil it down, these are the things that absolutely need to be there. And to give yourself finally the space to dream a bit. If I had no constraints, what would I be doing? And we find that thinking about those questions really provides an architecture and frame for the kind of experimentation that we do in the program, and for really starting to craft and move and to move much more intentionally towards a future that you've chosen and that you feel good about, and it's intentional. And so I want to end this piece and turn this over to Michelle, and then get your questions with a quote that I think for me and Stephanie really captures our promise for what we would hope the questions you would be answering in the program. Is from Mary Oliver, and she says, craft your next chapter, answer the question once again, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And our lives are wild and precious, and that's the wonderful opportunity for each of us. So Michelle, over to you. Do you want to share a little bit more and about the application process, and maybe we can, and then we take some questions as well.
Hi there, sorry about that. I couldn't come off mute for a second there. Well, thank you all so much for joining. If you are feeling as excited about this program as we are, I would love to share the information on how you can apply. So in the chat, I have just put both the link to the course's website, as well as the direct link to the application. It's a fairly simple application. We just ask a couple of questions about your intentions and what you hope to get out of this program, as well as for a copy of your resume so we can get a better sense of who you are. We are hoping to collect these applications within the next couple of weeks, and we plan to get back with our acceptances very quickly. As Russ and Stephanie have noted, spaces are limited, so if you're interested in joining this first cohort, please do be sure to apply as soon as you can.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for being with us. And I'm going to take down my screen now because we have reached question and answer, and I'm going to unmute so that anyone who is interested can just directly unmute and ask a question. We also welcome you to raise your hands. Literally, we can see you, or using the reactions tab on the bottom right of your Zoom screen. So we are eager to hear what you have to say, having spoken at you for quite a while now. I'll get started with a question from Simone. I love this program, but I will be traveling this fall. When is the next cohort? What time of day will this occur? Because it is possible that I can zoom in from where I'll be. So it's 3 to 5 p.m. And we are still discerning the next cohort. We will definitely have another one next autumn. There is a possibility that we would have a second as early as this upcoming spring. And so we will let anyone who's registered for the information sessions know as that next one is announced for those who can't be part of this one. Other questions?
So Seth, I think there was a question about, can people get a copy of the PowerPoints from the...
I believe the answer is absolutely, Russ. Is that true? Perfect.
Yeah, and in fact, I think the recording as well. Is that right? Which would certainly
Yeah, so
provide a little
everyone
bit of
who's here will
color
receive
commentary.
both.
Yeah.
You'll receive the recording along with anyone who registered and isn't here at this moment, and then we'll make sure to pass on the PowerPoints. Thank you, Richard. Jeffrey. Oh, let me see. Okay, great. I've tried to allow.
Okay, that worked.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I had two questions for Russ and Stephanie. One, when you did the program at MGH, did you do it in person or by Zoom? And if you did it in person, how do you think it's going to work by Zoom this time? My second question is, how would you compare this program to the more intensive programs that are being offered at Harvard and Stanford?
I can take the second, but why don't you go with the first, Russ?
Maybe I'll take the first part, and Russ, you can take the second part.
That sounds great.
We had to do it by Zoom because of protocol around COVID. And so, and it worked really, really well. It was a big transition, but it worked really, really well. And I think that what we've learned from working so intensely with Zoom over the last 3 years or so is that it's the way it's crafted and how you use the technology. And so we figured out ways to build community using that. Russ, did you have anything to add?
No, I think we had the same concern, Jeffrey, before teaching, and it was astonishing the power of the community that developed with folks and the level of trust.
And then,
Seth, do you want to pick up the second half of that? And yeah, go ahead.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. So the question about the programs, which I think you're referencing, Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative and Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute. The University of Chicago has launched an equivalent that is very much based on those kind of founding models in higher education, called the Leadership in Society Initiative. That is a much more immersive program where you come to the university full-time as a fellow for a year, and you actually take 5 courses each quarter, and you really discern what that next chapter is through humanistic inquiry, through deep understanding of the world and investigation of societal issues. And then by going through a very structured curriculum around all of the possibilities that typically make up a portfolio life. So, you look at board governance, you look at strategic philanthropy, you look at how to potentially write a memoir. So you kind of cover the gamut of possibilities. And that one is at a very significant level of commitment because people have to move here, find residence, and then be in classes for about 20 hours, or classes and experiences about 20 hours a week. So the rationale behind this is actually that as we were moving forward, LSI, as its acronym is called, we were getting a lot of inquiries from people who were saying, but I'm not retired yet, or I haven't reached that point yet, but I'd love to start thinking about what's next before I make that leap. So is there a way that you could take pieces and, help people to discern their next chapter while they may be in mid to late career and they want to begin planning, but they don't have the ability to come full time? And so this is very much part of the same universe of how do you discern your next chapter, but it's on the kind of more flexible and lighter side while still having depth and rigor that would be characteristic of any university program. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, go for it, Russ.
Well, and Seth, I just want to quickly add, I think the other thing that I think is quite powerful about, the power of what Seth's describing is it's immersive. You're getting out of your life, you're at the university, you have that opportunity. Part of the power in this program is, in fact, that you are in your life, right? And so the program is intentionally every other week. We have assignments and exercises in ways, we talk back to experimentation and trialing. So that rhythm of having a class, going out and doing stuff, actually experimenting, testing, talking to people and so on, coming back and reflecting with the group is very, very powerful. And I think that connects to, I think there was another question about community and connecting to other people in the course. We take that very seriously. We have people in the course create bios that aren't just professional bios, but personal bios to get to know each other. Lots of the courses in small groups, very deep bonds that get created with people. And this is very much about all of us teaching each other. We're all in this together. So the community is really pretty fundamental to what the program is about.
Judith, I see your question, and I saw your hand before, so thank you for putting it in here. You have the dates right, the 19th of next month through December, and we have certainly reached the minimum. So this cohort will run. We actually are in a place where we had one admission cycle already, and we have 19 people confirmed, and there are 5 spots that remain because there is a maximum of 24. And just so you know how Russ and Stephanie plan to endeavor this, they will at times be breaking up for discussion into 2 rooms so that there'll be conversations among the 24, but then there will be a lot of time spent as well in rooms of 12. And Russ and Stephanie, you can say more about that. But as we thought about the number that should be in a room, it was very important to us that this be intimate and interactive. And we believe at the Graham School that the greatest learning happens in co-construction of knowledge. There's a quote we love from Mortimer Adler that a lecture has the habit of going from the notes of the professor to the notes of the student without ever being in the mind of either. And so something that we really believe in is that dialogue is the best form of knowledge construction. And so it was very important to us in saying that we talked through, what would be a number that would allow diversity of lived experience and people being able to share, but also making sure that everyone is centered in their discussion. And so, yeah, Russ and Stephanie, anything more you want to say about that?
No, I think that's well put, Stephanie.
Well, I was just noticing there's a number of questions in the chat about building relationships, building community, and the answer to all of those are yes. We have ideas, not only that we set up a framework, but this is also a collaborative effort. And as new ideas get generated from the group to strengthen the group and the group cohesion in the community, we can easily integrate those as well.
The question
there's a strong peer peer-to-peer coaching dimension of this, because we're all on this journey together. And so a lot of what will happen in the program is we'll break you into small groups, as Seth talked about. You have an opportunity to share where you are with someone else and be helpful to them, and vice versa. So Seth, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to get back to Richard's question. There is not a formal certificate at the end, although one thing that we've seen in other examples where we have cohort-based programs is people declaring that they are a member of, the inaugural cohort of Crafting Your Next Chapter. So we leave that to individuals, but there are alternative ways that people can, acknowledge and celebrate their selection for such a cohort. We tend to hold certificates only in a place where we're certifying, a very explicit skill like, data analytics or those types of opportunities.
Yeah, the other thing it was interesting that we didn't expect is that we find that there's a proud alumni community and engaged active community that, the folks in the program want to get back together again, and we get them together after 3 months, and people have each other's contact information, so that at some level that becomes not just something that happens in the program, but really is an ongoing support for people as well.
Any other questions? I realize we're coming up to time in a moment. Well, let us just say a huge thank you. We're grateful to anyone who is really thinking about how they discern and activate a meaningful next chapter. And it's been a thrilling experience for us at the Graham School to really be entering this world and meeting so many people that are looking to have meaning and purpose, and make sure that all of these skills that you've built up over great accomplishment can continue to build toward a great legacy. So thank you, and to be continued, I'm sure, with many of you. We look forward to your questions and conversations ahead. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.